Hey, good morning, all friends, followers. Those of you joining me for the first time, Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. We've got activity in the tropics that does not look like it's going to let up anytime soon. And then some big changes coming in the weather across the U.S., some major flips and flops. Some of that courtesy, by the way, of a super typhoon in the Pacific last week that's causing the jet stream to get a lot more active. We've got bigger dips and bigger rises, kind of like a state fair ride, timely. I guess that's a I guess that's a timely statement here with a lot of state fairs going on this month here, Texas, North Carolina, too, I know about. But anyway, we've got hurricane potential, especially in the Pacific. Tropical storm Norma has gotten its act together very quickly, likely to become a hurricane later today. And that is going to affect the landscape of the weather here in the U.S. next week. An increase of moisture coming from the Pacific, but also a lot of rain and severe weather potential and some major temperature flips coming as well, with a big trough coming in behind Norma. So this could be another catastrophic storm for somebody in Mexico due to the fact that it's not going to be moving quickly. It's going to be over very warm water, and the path takes it over at least potentially Baja California here, but also northwestern Mexico and into the mountains there. We are also keeping an eye on something that has shown signs of more organization, tropical disturbance, Invest 94L in the Atlantic. And that could possibly become Tropical Storm Tammy here before the end of the week. And it is something we need to keep an eye on here in the Lesser Antilles. Models are still struggling on how exactly this is going to play out. As you can imagine, this time of the year in an El Nino, we've got uncertainty. But one thing that looks certain is that we've got a growing storm system that's going to produce at least heavy rain, if not some gusty wind with it. In between the two, I don't have it circled yet, but we're keeping an eye on things here around Central America for at least one area to potentially spawn here south of Mexico, maybe a second area on the Caribbean side as well. So that's what we'll be watching here in the next several days. And these systems are going to certainly be in play for a while, and they will be affecting the United States weather as well as Atlantic Canada's weather here in the coming days. Here's a look first in the Atlantic, then we'll shift to the Pacific. And we see an increased chance here for tropical development. Let me reset that because I had yesterday's up. But we are seeing now an 80% chance that this will likely form into a depression or storm over the next day or so. So probably by Friday morning. And that's also the time frame we're looking at potential trouble here across the Lesser Antilles. We are likely to see gusty winds, heavy rainfall, and flooding across portions of the Lesser Antilles beginning on Friday. So if you're in these islands here, especially the Leeward Islands, perhaps the British Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Northern Windward Islands, do start preparing now for some gusty winds and heavy rain. This is a storm system which it's not very quickly growing, but it is something that still could quickly grow. And the last thing I want is for you all to be kept off guard at this point. So it's something we've talked about for over a week here on Josh's Severe Weather. A lot of other meteorologists have been talking about it, and certainly something we need to keep an eye on. You can see a large area of shower and thunderstorm activity here east of the Lesser Antilles, right at about 46, 47 west. I'll zoom in a little bit and show you guys that. Also, we are still keeping an eye here on the Pacific for not one, but two systems. I'm going to talk about both of those. This is Norma, and this next feature has the potential to become Otis here in a few days. Outside of these three systems, 1, 2, 3, I don't think we're going to see any kind of development over the next 7 days or so. But I guess I should say never say never. So anyway, here's a look closer to home. The Gulf is very quiet. Excuse me, got a little bit of itch here. You can see some high clouds coming from our Pacific storm, but a lot of lower stratus clouds over the northern and central Gulf, indicating very stable air. This is what happens when much cooler air, which you will see often this time of the year now that we're getting into the middle of fall, goes over much warmer water. So that is going to be a storm killer here across the Gulf and the Northwest Caribbean for the time being. Farther south, we are watching a flare up here. Models are not going to do a great job in figuring out what happens, but you can kind of see a little bit of a spin on the Pacific side over here, south of Guatemala and El Salvador, and some thunderstorm activity forming. It's well offshore for the time being, and we want to keep it that way, but something could spin up here in about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days or so. On the Atlantic side, the Caribbean side, a lot of rain affecting Central America from eastern Honduras down to Costa Rica on the tail end of a front. We have to watch the tail ends of cold fronts over warmer water as wind shear lessens. We could see a lower level centered form and something tropical popping up. Models have struggled on how this is going to evolve, but we're still going to watch it. I don't think we can ever say never at this point. At the very least, Those of you who may be planning Caribbean cruises, especially to the Caymans, Jamaica over here, need to watch this because we're going to be talking about several inches of rain coming from it, regardless of if anything does develop. Same goes here for the Turks and Caicos, the Southeast Bahamas. We're going to look at some heavy rainfall. And now we're watching an upper level low here northeast of Puerto Rico that is going to kind of get infused into that front. So still a lot to talk about, even though we don't have a name system in the Atlantic for the time being. Now, here is the central Atlantic, and you can see pretty clearly a lot of thunderstorm activity firing up here. Still a lack of a low-level center, but I think that's going to gradually change here in the coming days. If we take a look at the water vapor image, you'll be able to see kind of why this hasn't really developed. We've got an upper level low that's kind of spinning up here over the Lesser Antilles. And what that does is it produces a southwesterly wind flow, which takes the tops of these thunderstorms and shears them away from the center, which is the last direction they need to be for tropical development. We can have tropical development with wind shear. That has happened several times here in the Atlantic. But this time of the year, it starts getting a little bit tougher to get things to kind of consolidate into one little central feature. So it's still going to be something that once that wind shear lets up, does have a potentially high ceiling for development. But until that happens, it's still kind of a guessing game at this point. Here's a look at the visible image, and you can see here from tropicaltidbits.com. And let me stop this because it's not quite loading as quickly as I would like. Apologize for that. But you can see our first images of the day, some very concentrated thunderstorm activity on the eastern side of the center, but the western side is pretty naked at this point. And until we see things kind of wrapping around the center, it's not going to develop very quickly. It could, though. It just isn't doing it just yet. So that's what we're going to be watching here in the next few days. You can see the ensembles show a high chance of development into a tropical depression here in the next 48 hours, and still a high chance that we have a depression moving through the Lesser Antilles over the next 48 to 60 hours. By the weekend, this could potentially still impact the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico. Tough to say exactly until it forms, and then it is likely to pull away to the north and east. And we see improvement in the islands here by the beginning of next week. Something to watch in Bermuda, but likely it's going to stay off to your south and east. And then behind that, there's nothing else to really stress about here in the Atlantic. That's it for the time being. I'm not saying November is going to be completely quiet as the waters still remain very warm, but we start to see kind of a drop off in activity once we get past this future storm, which I think will eventually become Tammy. Here are model tracks here from our tropical and global models, and you can see the average of them is very close to the northern Leeward Islands, very close to where Philippe was impacting this area just a few weeks ago. There are still a few solutions that keep this well to the east, including the GFS model and the HWRF model. We have one tropical model that's still coming in farther south, closer to Barbados, and then right on through Guadeloupe, Martinique, Dominica, the Central Islands over here, and eventually getting over into the Virgin Islands, close to Puerto Rico. But the average of the models goes kind of over the northern Leeward Islands. So where that potential landfall point is going to be very difficult to figure out until we finally see something going. This is kind of, if you take all the ensembles, group them together and pick out the average of them, you can see that the average trend is back to the left a little bit. A couple days ago, the average was about 250 miles east of these islands. Now that mean has shifted west as our system still hasn't developed yet. Until it does, it's not going to go as poleward as quickly as we would think. And as a result, this obviously increases the risk for potentially a storm going right through the Leeward Islands. And we're talking, this is just 2.5 days away, so we don't have a lot of time. We may have a potential tropical cyclone advisory set up if we do, in fact, see tropical storm watches, which I think is a possibility later tonight or maybe first thing here tomorrow on Thursday. The GFS ensembles, you can see the mean is a little bit to the right of the other ensembles. It stays just east of the islands, but about a third of those solutions go across the Northeast Caribbean. About a third make it a more intense system here, staying north and east and really not strengthening until it pulls away. And potentially some pretty strong solutions here over no man's land here over the central Atlantic. And still a few ensemble members keep it well to the east of both the islands and Bermuda, which is what I'm rooting for, but what I think is less and less likely. We saw that with Philippe, where the GFS wanted to quickly take off with development and very quickly turn things away. That did not happen. This certainly looks like a kind of a similar solution to Philippe as well. And you can see on the European ensembles here, more agreement between the control, the ensemble, and the mean. Don't get too caught up in what those all mean. But when we see more agreement like that, that obviously increases the confidence of this track. But I actually like to watch the trends rather than look at where the model mean is, because it's going to shift some more. And you can see a pretty narrow solution here. A lot of ensembles going into the Northeast Caribbean on the European. So the GFS goes to the right of these islands. The European goes over and to the left of them. Take the average of the two, and we're probably sweeping right up the island chain here. The time frame for that's going to be probably Friday afternoon, Friday night, and first thing on Saturday. Now, how strong is this system going to be? Well, I don't really know. All I can really do is show you some potential solutions here. There are solutions which do not strengthen this much past weak tropical storm strength. There are some that go to hurricane strength by Friday morning. So it still has a lot of time to figure out if it's going to consolidate or not. And the later it does so, the weaker the solution is going to be. Now, having said that, as it pulls away from the islands, it has potential to become a hurricane. Now, I did fall for that head fake during Philippe, where I thought this was going to be a hurricane after it pulled away, and then wind shear got to be too strong for it. So while there are solutions that do show this becoming a major hurricane, we saw this before, and that did not happen. So I think probably Category 1 or high-end tropical storm is going to be the play at this point. But of course, that could still be uncertain. Here's the HAFS tropical model, and you can see we're looking in 24 hours at potentially a tropical storm. According to this, I think it's going to be a little bit too aggressive, but notice how the track is farther south and west from future models, and it does show a hurricane moving into the islands, and I think that's still a possibility. The time frame here is going to be early in the day on Saturday if that happens. It's not a large storm according to the HAFS. It's pretty compact, so where this actually tracks is going to be huge. I mean, if it goes 50 miles north of one island, they may get basically escaped. If it goes right over it, different story. We're potentially dealing with tropical storm or even hurricane conditions. It should begin to pull away here Saturday night, and by Sunday, we're going to see improvement across these islands. I don't know if this storm is going to get as deep as the model shows. 943 millibars is a Category 4 hurricane. I have a feeling that that's going to end up being way too intense. We're probably talking a 1 or a 2 at the very worst. And then we're going to see the storm beginning to recurve, and more than likely it's going to go south and east of Bermuda, and potentially very, very far south and east. It may look like it's heading there and then make a hard right and go and escape and not affect anybody. On the Pacific side of things here, we now have Tropical Storm Norma, which I'm going to talk about. We also have a second area that has come off of the Central American coastline and likely to form into a tropical depression, maybe a 70% chance here by this time next week. So late this weekend or early next week, we may be dealing with Tropical Storm Otis at that point. And there may be something behind it later next week as well that follows a similar path. We're going to keep an eye on both of these systems. Norma obviously is growing very quickly and has the potential to become a strong hurricane here very quickly. Very good outflow, very low wind shear, very warm waters. This one actually is in a more favorable spot than what we saw with Lydia here just a week or so ago. But it's also going to be going farther away from Mexico when it does that. So that is some good news in that it looks like if it does intensify quickly, it'll be over open waters and not right near the coastline. Our next system here we're keeping an eye on right now, not a lot of deep convection, but we do have thunderstorm activity here to keep an eye on as well. And that's something we need to watch in Mexico as well. Nora, 65-mile-per-hour winds as of this morning's advisory, likely to become our next hurricane, perhaps as quickly as this afternoon or evening, and predicted to become a major Category 3 hurricane here by tomorrow evening. After that, it does leave these deeper colors of water, it heads into slightly cooler waters, and the forecast shows it gradually weakening back to Category 1 strength. However, if it gets stronger than this, which is very possible that the Hurricane Center could be a little conservative, then we could have a stronger storm coming up closer to Baja California, with the time frame being next Monday. For the most part, models do show this turning north and then making a right turn towards Mexico. The speed and timing of that is going to be somewhat uncertain. It could be as soon as Sunday night. It could take until Tuesday. The reason why is that we've got a trough getting ready to move into the west. It's not there yet. It's still very hot in the southwest. That'll affect playoff games in Arizona here in the next couple of days, but that trough is expected to move in and eventually flip the weather pattern and eventually pick up Norma and pull it northeastward into Mexico, where it'll weaken at that point. But as it does so, it could be a very strong storm across the opening of the Gulf of California. Model trends are more to the right. You can see there's obviously a spot where it's going to stall and maybe loop around a little bit here until the trough picks it up. And it's still very uncertain as to the exact timing for this. We can see on the GFS, a lot of uncertainty. One solution goes well out to sea, but the majority of the solutions have it affecting Baja California here early next week, and quite a few turn it to the right here and eventually take it all the way across, with the operational GFS taking it into the Big Bend here towards the middle of next week and pulling it all the way up into the Great Lakes. So I'm spending a lot of time talking about Norma because, as you can see here, there's a decent amount of support that this system affects the U.S. and likely pulls in colder air with the trough that's going to lift it northeast. Significant rain, severe weather, all of that looks to be a possibility here as this system accelerates northeast. How it's going to do so, though, right now is still uncertain because it's a week away. But as we get closer to that time frame, we'll obviously have a better feel for things. The model forecasts all show this becoming a hurricane. Some go up to category 2 and 3. And I would not be shocked if it even tried to get to category 4. As you guys know, I look at intensity forecasts, and when I see a storm that can rapidly intensify, I know it's going to overachieve. We've seen that with Idalia. We saw that with Lydia. The models do a good job. They're getting better, but they're not there yet. They're a little bit behind the curve. You can see that on the ship's model here. There is potentially a huge amount of ceiling here, up to 160 knots. It could get to category 5. Probably more likely it's a 3 or 4 as you look at these possibilities here. A 0% chance that this thing is going to strengthen to 120 knots, which is basically 145 miles per hour. But a pretty good chance in 2 days that it is going to strengthen at least category 3 strength, maybe even category 4. But you can see the amount of relative humidity does drop down some. So we're going to lose some of the fuel in place for a storm to grow as we get into some drier air here. It may not get to the core right away, but eventually it could. But the heat content is huge here in 48 hours here. Quite a bit of content in place and warm surface temperatures of 85 degrees Fahrenheit. All of these favor a strong storm. And those of you in Mexico that may be watching, I know there's not a lot of you, but those of you that are, know that October can be very much a key window for strong storms to develop and affect the Mexican coast. Let's look real quick at the Western Pacific. I won't spend a lot of time here. We now have a new tropical storm, Sanba. It's over the Gulf of Tonkin, going to head towards the northwestern part of the Gulf, but not become a strong tropical storm, just a moderate storm, 50 miles per hour here in the next 24 hours, and will be impacting Vietnam with heavy rain. We're also going to watch a spin up of storms in the Bay of Bengal that could drift northward, but a bigger threat in the Arabian Sea. This is Invest 91A, 25 miles per hour, low chance right now of developing into a strong cyclone, but down the road it could over here in the Arabian Sea. So we're going to keep an eye on that for you guys. In the U.S., cool weather here in the east is going to gradually moderate, and you can see heights go above average here in New England. We've got a strong trough expected to drop down into the Great Lakes here tomorrow, and a huge ridge expected to build in the west. This is going to reinforce the cool weather in the east later in the weekend. It's also going to bring us significant amounts of moisture and a significant coastal storm that moves up the east coast here Friday and ends up in New England here Saturday afternoon and Saturday night. And if you're in New England, you've been setting your clock every weekend this month for rain, because that's exactly what we're dealing with. Same goes for Atlantic Canada later in the weekends. You can see down here, this is Hurricane Norma, and you can see a massive trough here getting ready to push into the west, but also a massive ridge in the way of it. So when we see these significant changes, and a lot of this is fueled by our recurving typhoon that was in the Western Pacific last week, you start to deal with heavy rain, you deal with more moisture transport, and you deal with more extreme temperatures and more extreme weather. So early next week, we've got cool, unsettled weather back in place here in the Northeast, but we do have warming coming by the middle of next week, and above average temperatures should make for some pretty good weather to leaf peep here in the mountains here later next week. But here comes our next trough, and it's a two-piecer here. You see the remains of Norma getting drawn up into the southwest low, and then you see a tail feature coming down through the Rockies. And when I see a tail feature dropping down like this, I know it's going to get colder fast. I also think we're going to be dealing with winter weather for many of these areas in here by the end of next week. And then that cool air sweeps east, and Halloween weekend, I don't know if it's a weekend, but Halloween festivities early next week could be pretty chilly in the east, but moderating in the west. Here's a look at our temperature anomalies real fast. You can see the cool air in the southeast still around until the beginning of the weekend. And then that cool air rebuilds into the east and Great Lakes here early next week. But look how warm the plains get here. We may be seeing temperatures into the 90s in Kansas by Tuesday, and even 70s and 80s up into Minnesota and Wisconsin. That warmth is going to spread into New England. But take a look here at this big trough dropping down, big time drop in temperature as Montana goes from 20, 25 degrees above average on Monday to 25 degrees below average by Thursday morning. And that cold continues to expand south and east. And as we head towards Halloween here, we could be well below average for much of the country, except maybe South Florida, where it'll be warmer and more humid. And then the Western United States could be pretty warm as well. So stay tuned on that one. From Tropical Tidbits, I'll show you the GFS real quick here. This was the 0Z run, but you can see our storm here moving through the Great Lakes. We'll see quite a bit of wind, cool, wet weather here at the end of the week. Significant rain as well coming up the North Carolina coastline here Thursday night. We could have very heavy rain over the Outer Banks. But take a look here at Saturday morning. Looks pretty lousy across the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region here. Saturday morning, pretty much a washout across the Lehigh Valley, the Delaware Valley, the Tidewater, heading up into western parts of New England. It'll be mild New England, but look at this deepening low pressure system. And Saturday night into Sunday morning, we're talking about significant rain. Not great weekend weather for those of you who like to look at fall foliage in the Northeast. We could even see a change over to some wet snow across upstate New York here on Sunday morning. Not a big snowfall, but in the mountains, we could see several inches accumulating. Flash forward here to next week, and we do have Hurricane Norma coming into Mexico. I don't know about the intensity yet, but look at the moisture from it. This is going to move up into western and central Texas and Oklahoma by Wednesday morning, and we are going to see significant amounts of rain and maybe some severe weather here some point on Wednesday or Wednesday night, maybe into Thursday as well. And this could impact parts of the deep south. Those of you in Louisiana watching this are saying, oh, we're going to get rain. I'm on board with that severe weather, but we could have some severe weather down here. But take a look at the cold air dropping in behind this storm. GFS has gone back and forth on who gets it, but I think we're going to see heavy snow across the Rockies. And there is some potential this could turn into a winter storm across Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas, and eventually the UP of Michigan into Canada by the end of next week. And this could follow with our first lake effect snow shower activity here by Sunday into the following week towards Halloween, at least earlier in the day. So stay tuned on that one. Rain totals over the next few days, you can see they are going to climb in the east here Friday night. We see significant rain, and then take a look here at Saturday night across Maine and New Brunswick. And then a big storm moves into the west, and we're going to get awfully wet here by the middle of next week with 12-hour rainfall totals that could go over an inch. Here's a look at snow as well. Yes, we're talking snow, and we could see significant snow coming into the Rockies here Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And then take a look at the plains here. You can see a blend of models showing some significant amounts of snow around the upper Midwest and tracking across Ontario and into Quebec by the end of next week and next weekend. Rain potential on the GFS here in the Northeast is climbing up to 3 inches on Hatteras, maybe up to ½ an inch around Virginia Beach. And then we see rain, this is Friday evening, picking up over western PA, over the eastern Great Lakes, also picking up over eastern New York. And significant rain over portions of the Hudson Valley on Saturday. Amounts over an inch are expected. As we head into Saturday night and Sunday, New England gets in on all the fun, and we could see amounts of up to 3 inches across parts of Vermont and up to 2 inches in Maine, Massachusetts, Northeast Connecticut, and New Hampshire, as well as around eastern Lake Ontario. In millimeters, we're probably talking 30 to 40 over parts of New Brunswick and northwestern Nova Scotia. Well, I appreciate y'all's time today. Thank you again for your support. If you are a returning guest, there is an opportunity for you to become a member for $9.99 a month. No pressure, but if you feel led to, I very much would appreciate that. Those of you who are just joining me for the first, second, third time, please consider subscribing and sharing with your friends. The tropics are going to play into our weather here. We're also going to start talking more winter and heavy rain. And I do expect that we're going to have some travel challenges here coming up over the next few weeks across the country. As you can see, the jet stream gets more active, the weather changes more drastically, and as we head to November, we deal with potentially more problems, as a lot of you like to travel, as do I. Excuse me. So I really appreciate y'all's time today. I thank you as always, and as always as well, I give all the glory to God. He is the reason I'm here today, the reason you're here today, in my opinion. If you don't believe that, that's fine, but I truly believe that this platform is here for me just to share that We serve a great God, and that he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross for us to live eternally. Romans 10:9 says that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. For the scripture saith, whoever so believeth on him shall not be ashamed. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. This is my confession that I didn't want to gamble with my eternity when I decided that I was going to follow Jesus Christ as my Savior. He's going to save me, and eternally I can live in heaven. I pray that's the case for you as well. If it's not, I'm not here to judge you. I don't want you to feel bad about this. I know some of you may be turning away saying, oh, great, he's a Jesus freak. You know what? I understand. It's not about me, though. It's about him. It's about the salvation that is coming to me. It's about confessing that the Lord our God is King of all the world. He created the earth. He brought Jesus Christ onto the cross to resolve our sins and to allow us to be redeemed and to live eternally. And 10 years ago, I did not know him the way I do now. But I did know I didn't want to gamble with my eternity. I was in a place where I was dark. I had very uncertain thoughts, thoughts of, harm, to be honest with you guys, at sometimes. But I was saved. People were brought into my life through God that allowed me to study and realize that there's a greater purpose for me and that I've got a purpose on earth here. And all of you have a purpose on earth, believe it or not, no matter what you're going through. All I know is that all we can really do is turn to God and pray and ask him to forgive us, ask him to save us, and ask him to help us through these tough times that we're going through. Because whether or not there's a God, we're going to deal with tough times. But all I know is the only way we can overcome those is with God through Jesus Christ. So I'm happy to pray for you all. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to connecting with you again tomorrow and providing you more updates here on the tropics, severe weather, and heavy rain. God bless you all. Have a great Wednesday. See ya.